Hello and welcome to AFL Podcasts, the home of objective, up-to-date and independent reporting on Turkey. Don't forget to follow our reports through social media, on aflnews.com or through our mobile app. Let's get started.
Hello, our listeners. Today we have Yahya Madra. Yahya Madra is teaching economics at Drew University and follows Turkish economy and political landscape very closely. Hi, Yahya Madra.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thanks again for coming on. And let me go right into my first question. In few days, Turkey will have local elections, and President Erdogan has been campaigning very strongly for over a month, about 6 weeks now, and he has been, today I saw he visited about 50 cities out of 80 cities, 80 some cities in Turkey. So he is very aggressive. Can you give us an overview whether in economy, Turkish economy, and political landscape, and perhaps if you can share your prediction, if possible, for this Sunday?
So, of course, Turkish economy is in recession. I mean, we can now say that pretty comfortably with the most recent data. The unemployment levels are unexpectedly high. These are also very important variables. In particular, unemployment among youth is very high. There are strong indications that the central bank has been sort of using its reserves to keep the currency at the value. Recently, there are a lot of control in the banking system, So there's a lot of very active, proactive stabilization, stabilization only in the sense short-term sense. Policies are being enacted. It's clearly the economy is in a very sort of difficult state, and a total collapse is being postponed, or constantly a time is being gained by sort of delaying the collapse. And particularly what we're expecting is the industrial sector in particular is having difficulty. These unemployment numbers are suggesting that, and the construction sector has collapsed more or less, significantly. So in a way, therefore, the economic landscape is pretty dark, and it's really difficult to even hide the crisis. As a result, of course, one strategy we observed throughout the elections is that Erdogan and the government accepts that there is somewhat of a problem in the economy, and they're doing everything. The indication is that they're doing a lot to solve it. At least that's their claim. And B, they're explaining it through conspiracy theories and also sort of imperialist machinations and so on and so forth. So one, they provide a narrative to explain why the crisis is happening, and two, they're also giving the image, the public relations, through these sort of what we call the sales, these sale points for vegetables and groceries across the city, where the product produced is being sold at a price that is below what you would be finding in the supermarkets. So these types of activities are giving the impression that Erdogan government is doing something about it. Yes, it is sort of probably on the opposition side, it is a good prop to explain, look, there's a crisis, and here where we are with all these queues and so on and so forth. But on the side of Erdogan and the government is that, look, we're doing something about it. So that's the two images that are in fight. These two sort of representations are in fight. But of course, Turkey's problem is deeper than that. It's a political problem, political in the sense that the new regime's organizational structure is highly disorganized and it's not settled in any form or shape. Secondly, it's a deeper political problem in terms of the division in the society. That's also sort of a major issue. And finally, it's a deeper political problem in terms of the regional politics, where Turkey sits between Russia and US in relationship to the civil war in Syria, right? So all of these political problems are layering on top of each other. So that's also creating the context of this economic crisis. And of course, we have other problems, the ecological crisis in general, as the broader context of all this.
So you have laid out very well these problems, Turkey's problems, economics, politics, ecology. How do you think Erdogan's campaigning strategy fared? Do you think Erdogan could have done something different than the very aggressively basically going after the half of the country and labeling most of them, let's say, not if not 50%, but most of them basically labeling as terrorists, quote unquote?
I think it's a surprisingly aggressive campaign at some level, given the division and the polarization in the society. I mean, if Erdogan just didn't do anything and just talked about the projects and what they're doing with the economic crisis and a more positive campaign, that may have been maybe more than enough at some level. But I think the objective of this is not only to consolidate his own basis, this ultra-nationalist basis, around a kind of villainization of the Kurdish autonomy desires, but also to divide the opposition and to really sort of lock the opposition into a sort of particular position so that they cannot join forces in a meaningful manner. I mean, Erdogan is reproducing his position precisely because the opposition is not able to produce a convincing and broadly sort of defined vision, imaginary for Turkish and society of Turkey, the peoples of Turkey, including both the Turkish and Kurdish populations, as well as Arabs and Laz and so on and so forth. So it's a vision that would bring everyone together is not possible because of this aggressive sort of friend-enemy politics that Erdogan is enacting. So the real target of this policy is to divide the opposition and therefore disable it.
I understand. Let's move to Sunday. There are polls out there, and most of the polls telling us that Ankara will be going to opposition. Mansur Yavaş appears to be a very strong candidate. He has been following a smart strategy, and also other polls telling us that large cities like Bursa, Adana, Mersin, Adıyaman, some others might be also going to opposition, even though Istanbul appears to be again going to the AKP most likely. Can you tell us your expectation if, let's say, Adana and few other big cities going to the opposition? What would be the immediate or midterm implications of such result?
Of course, first of all, such a sort of change of hands would be in itself a major thing, and it's important. I understand Istanbul has a much slimmer chance of switching of the power, but Ankara, Izmir, and few other big cities, metropoles, as well as all the, of course, predominantly Kurdish cities are going to go to the opposition, either in Republican People's Party or HDP, People's Democratic Party. Now, of course, the consequence of this would be what Erdogan is already threatening with, and other AKP figures are doing that, that governors will be assigned. The elected officials will be taken down due to this or that reason, whether they're affiliated with, they will be argued to affiliated with the terrorist organization, or they had some other criminal activity in the past. So something will be sort of brought up, and based on those, governors will be assigned. Now, that seems to be what would be the next step. But the one consequence of that is that it's increased authoritarianism, and also reduced legitimacy of Erdogan's sort of actions, at least sort of for a public that believes in democracy and believes in the right to elect those who are going to govern us, right? That's a very basic sort of democratic principle. Now, once that happens, of course, it's still an open situation, because then the question becomes, will Turkish opposition and Kurdish opposition come together and oppose these sort of processes, not only in Kurdish provinces, but also in the West, in Ankara, for instance, and a kind of a joint platform may emerge that questions these anti-democratic sort of policies after the election. Whether this will come together or not is an open question, but one's hope is that it would come together, and that would actually further the process. So it would mean that the election will not be the end of the struggle, but it would be just a moment within which the resistance towards increasing authoritarianization and a kind of unified bloc for democratic, to protect the democratic institutions, will further form itself. At least that would be the hope.
We'll see whether Turkish opposition, if such results come about, they're going to miss such chance again, as they are known with their missing the opportunities and opportunities. My final question, if I may: Erdogan has been, as we discussed, following this very aggressive and divisive campaign, and he talked about the New Zealand, this horrible massacre in New Zealand, and he actually shown those footages in most of his campaign speeches to everyone, including kids. After the election, Turkey will not have another election till 2023 if nothing dramatic happens. What would, given the economy situation and political crisis you have been describing in this podcast, do you think Erdogan, if he wants to turn his face to West, EU and the US, do you think he can get himself integrated with the West as he used to be pre-2013 at this point?
First of all, in terms of the massacre in New Zealand, I must say that the Prime Minister of New Zealand's performance and overall New Zealand society's performance have been quite sort of wonderful, and to say such a thing in this context, wonderful is wrong perhaps, but quite stark in contrast with the way in which it was handled in Turkey. So I think that's important thing to highlight and sort of recognize. positive performance of the New Zealand government. In terms of Turkey's relationship to the international sphere, I think what I'm seeing is that sort of it being reduced to a very, very stark transactional basis, where Turkey's role is just to prevent the refugee flow from Syria, and it's not just a Syrian civil war; it's a general ecological crisis in the region. So there is always a flow of refugees into Europe, and Turkey's role would be to prevent that from happening. And to the extent that that is there, Europe is going to just accept an authoritarian Turkey, it seems. There's also some economic ties with Turkey, that there's a lot of supply chains, as well as also financial investment in Turkey, that Europe is also kind of not in a position to really question, especially given the economic crisis in Europe, in Eurozone as well. So my sense is that the relationship with Europe will not turn into a new honeymoon or in any form or shape. It will continue in this low level, like an arm's length level. Of course, Europe will not give up Turkey, try not to give up Turkey to leave NATO, for instance. So Turkey will remain in NATO, it seems, unless something dramatic happens. And US is also, of course, going to be in arm's length in terms of the Syrian question. I mean, yes, Trump may be in good terms with Erdogan, but at the end of the day, US's position in Syria is very much determined by its position in relation to Iran and against Russia, therefore, and also Israel, of course. Therefore, it is not going to budge from demanding Turkey to take sides with US and arrive an entente with the Kurdish formation there. And since Turkey is not going to do that, and since Turkey also has ties with Russia in different ways, very deep ties as well. So it's going to be in between these two powers, pushed and pulled, and without really able to formulate a policy of its own. So I think this is going to be a kind of, again, a game of balance, or sort of balance of forces are going to pull and push Turkey without Turkey being able to come together and formulate a vision. So I see a kind of much entropic situation where there is a dissipation of energy, and the crisis in the ongoing recent midterm future of Turkey. I don't see a kind of vision to get out of here, even in this so-called presidential framework.
Okay, thank you so much, Yahya Madra, for coming on today and shedding light on some of the issues of Turkey today, a few days before the election. I'm hoping to continue discussing Turkey following elections. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.